Okay, good afternoon. My name is Ashley Appling. I'm the Horticulture Extension Agent in the Virginia Cooperative Extension Culpeper County office. I also cover Madison and Orange counties too. So 3-county area. Today, just like I mentioned, we had a couple folks just join on. We'll be talking about vertical gardening, moisture management, and herb culture. So we'll be talking about a selection of different herbs in addition to a little bit about melons, okra, and squash. So if you have any questions, some of y'all have already started putting your questions in the chat box. Feel free to do that. It's hard for me to see the chat box as I am speaking today, so we'll answer all the questions towards the end of the presentation. A lot of folks now joining on, so okay, let's get going. Okay, so a little bit of introduction into vertical gardening. I know a lot of y'all are growing tomatoes. We've already had a good couple of those questions in the chat box. So if you're not using trellises yet, your tomato plants are probably sprawling all over the ground. So you can use a number of different things to help out those tomato plants, help out those cucumber plants. Melons can become very interesting. As you know, melons get very heavy, so you have to use some kind of support. Some folks use pantyhose, some people just use any kind of netting they can just to support the melons. But there's a wide range of things you can do. You can grow, you're not going to grow the giant 25, 30-pound watermelons on the trellis very easily. But you can definitely grow cantaloupes and some of the smaller icebox size watermelons, 10 pounds or less. There's a lot of those varieties you can grow. As I said earlier, there is a thunderstorm coming, so I apologize if it's starting to get a little dark and you can't see my video very well. But any rain's a welcome rain, so hopefully you're getting what you need too. But you can use different trellises, nets. We'll talk about some coming up in the next couple of slides. Cages can work. The cheap tomato cages you can buy at the home improvement store. Some of those, as you can tell, can pull themselves out of the ground very easily. For tomatoes, especially if you're growing 4, 5, or 6 tomato plants or more, I really prefer planting them in as straight of a line as you can go, and using what we'll show a few more minutes, we'll be talking about what they refer to as Florida weave. So basically you're using garden twine to, you're weaving it in between the plants and you're making a trellis out of the garden twine. So that's my favorite way of growing tomatoes. That works very well. The cheap triangular, kind of like cone-shaped tomato cages, they work very well for the tomatillos we talked about in the June presentation. But for tomatoes, unless it's a small determinate variety of tomato, they're going to be very frustrating in some cases, especially if your tomato plants are growing very vigorously. Pole beans, I didn't mention those earlier, but you can certainly grow pole beans on any kind of trellis like that. Yeah, cucumbers is on there, so that's a good one to be on there. Great for small space gardening. You can stick in a lot of different vegetables in a small area by vertically growing. And we'll have some pictures of that coming up, which are just amazing the way that they're growing the plants. Allows for more sunshine. Sunshine's very important. That produces the sugars, helps the plant to produce more fruit, produce more nutrients for the plant. So sunshine, surface area is very important. We have more folks joining, so 1 second, y'all. Also, vertical gardening also helps a lot, especially if you're starting to see some different foliar leaf diseases. That word's always hard for me to say, foliar. But leaf diseases on your tomatoes, you want a lot of good air circulation in addition too. So vertical gardening really helps with that. Air circulation dries out the dew faster. Any kind of irrigation you do to help dry that out faster. You want to get the water off the leaves as soon as possible. So a lot of different tomato diseases can really wreak havoc if you're constantly The leaves are constantly wet or they're not drying out very quickly. And also, you have little pockets. You have little shaded areas that you can work with. Right now, it's really hot, but sometimes you can get away with if we have a little bit cooler weather, maybe in the future. Hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe. You could fit in some Swiss chard nicely behind the tomatoes, behind your cucumber trellis. You could also fit in some lettuces very easily behind there, just growing in that shade. So leafy greens can take less sun. The way that's usually recommended is some of the leafy greens can take 4 to 6 hours of sunlight and they'll grow fine. Tomatoes, you really want 8+ hours of direct sunlight. So direct sunlight is you go out into your yard and the sun touches that. You can cast a shadow basically on that spot by standing there for at least 8 hours a day is what you need for tomato growth. So if you're growing them in kind of a shaded area, they might not grow as well. I know my yard is very shady and my tomatoes, they're getting shaded for a lot of the day. So they still look okay, but they're not growing as fast as they could. So, but let's go look at some pictures. It's always nice to look at pictures. Oh, those are coming. I got ahead of myself. So a little more wording for you to read. Uh, I did not mention before, but all of this information I will send out as a PDF. So you'll have the presentation, the link to the recording I'll also send out. And then we have a few handouts that I'll send out along too. So everybody that registered will get all that information I just spoke about. So trellis is basically can be an open lattice work. It can be more involved in that. Excuse me. Arches, arbors, and pergolas would also be in that same kind of area. Would be a trellis. So they can be made with netting, strings. The Florida weave I mentioned for the tomato trellis, especially that'll be a string type of trellis. You could also use that for beans too. That would work nice. Poles, wire fencing, bamboo trellises, the little 3-pole TP type of trellis is what they usually refer to that as. So you can use that type. Stakes can work perfectly fine. Usually either wooden or metal stake. The stake would just mean you have one. So you just have one and you're tying the plants up to that stake. As long as that stake is tall, tomato plants can get very tall, but you can tie up the stem of the plant as it grows, and you can use one trellis at a time. You would have to be doing pruning then, though. A lot of folks will prune out the side shoots on tomatoes, so that is an option. So you only have the main shoot, and that's all you have. So you actually pinch out or cut out the little side shoots that come in the little crotch of the where the tomato leaf connects to the main stem. You'll see tons of little shoots coming up from those little connection points. And you can cut that out, and a lot of folks do that. Commercial growers actually do that too. So lots of different options, simple or ornate. So one wouldn't stick out there, or you have a beautiful pergola or arbor. So it's up to you how far you want to go one way or the other. So here's a few selections. So in the upper left-hand corner, you have a pretty commonly not too expensive trellis, just wood slats back and forth. But you can get much more complicated, as you can see with the different ones in this picture. So metal, wood, you could just use bamboo and make your own too. So there's no fast and set rule. Basically, it's just getting the plants into a vertical space so that they're growing vertically is what's really important. Oops. There we go. So a few things you could need. You don't need all of these, but you could, my screen shows the floating panel, and I do not see that because I can't see my whole presentation. So let's see. Oh, well, it wants to be. There we go. We got it. Okay, so there's a few different little pieces and things here and there. So you'll have the metal wiring, the whether it's rabbit fencing, chicken fencing, cattle panels, any of that could be used as trellis, especially for beans. Would be very good for green beans. All the different kinds of beans. So your black-eyed peas, all the different summer type, delicious type of things like that. So you can use the metal T-posts. Metal T-posts right here in the center picture work very nice. That's what I use for my supports. I have about 7 or 8 because I only have about 8 tomato plants, so about 1 per plant. And you space them out. I'm not very scientific about it, but I have mine spaced out so I can use the twine. That's what they will be using right here down the lower left-hand picture. You have this twine here, and then you basically go in between the plants. So you have a line of tomatoes, you have your T-post supports, you tie it off on one T-post support, you go back and forth around the plants one direction till you get to the end of the line, you tie it off again, or actually you do not tie it off, sorry. Twirl it around a couple times, and then you come back the other direction around the plants. And that's perfect support. I had 12, 13-foot tomato plants one year, and that supported them perfectly. So that works great. That's my preferred way if you've never tried it before for support for tomatoes. And then, of course, all the little different bamboo stakes you can use, wooden stakes, bamboo stakes. All of these would make trellises. So you don't have to buy something. You can make your own, and they work well. And I apologize if it's getting darker on my video. It really looks like it's getting ready to thunderstorm pretty good here. So just a few different selections, how they've been being used. So you have these beans right here. garden TP trellis is what those are using. Wire grid growing panels. You have the support right there. You have the cucumber growing up it. And then you have some leafy greens growing under it. So that's what I was talking about earlier about you can grow leafy greens in the shade. So like lettuce, Swiss chard would like it in those conditions. So that works very nice. Another option of garden teepee right here in the middle right-hand picture, just the larger version. So you have many poles supporting it right there. And then you tie it off at the top. So at the very top there, you just tie it off. And then you could even use an old ladder as you're seeing right here. The vines are just growing over top. The squash vines are just growing right over top of the garden ladder right there. So lots of different options. Just whatever works for you will work great. Or should work great. You never want to jinx things. You want to knock on wood. Hopefully it all works out. Tomato supports, lots of different options. Like I said before, this is the one I was referring to at the garden store you might buy. These fall over a lot. They bend easy. Not my first option. Here's the twine, the Florida weave. So you tie it off on the T-post, goes back and forth. So you can see one line going this way around the tomato, and this line's tied off and it goes the opposite way. So it's supporting it. So you do it at different heights as they grow. So you can put them as close as you want, or maybe not as far apart as you want, because that could get kind of ugly, but they could fall over easier. But I love that version of it. I love the Florida weave support for tomatoes, and there's not a lot to store. You can use the degradable twine, the one that just degrades over the growing season, and you're fine to go. Wired grid panels, you can also use that for tomatoes. So as the tomatoes are growing, you gently nudge them in one direction, nudge them back through the other cell, all the way up, and that'll support a tomato very well too. So many different options. You can make your own cylinders with those wire grid panels too. Just like this picture is right here showing in the upper left middle picture. So that works nice. And then we have the single stake here. So the tomato, so you're cutting back the secondary shoots, tying it around the main, kind of making like a little tree. So you're tying it around the main stalk as it grows up this stake. So any of these options work. Some people say one option is always better than the other. Some people don't like one option, but find one that works for you and you should be good. Cucumber, melon, and squash supports. I did not have to read that off, but I did. Sorry about that, y'all. But lots of different options for that. This is the little support for the watermelons I was mentioning at the beginning of the presentation. So you have to use some kind of little bag to support the watermelon as it grows if you're going to use the wire grid panels for watermelons. So you're not going to want to use the real heavy ones. The small icebox size would be better. So 10 pounds or less, unless you can find a really good support bag, probably 10 pounds or less. This middle picture and down here with all those gourds and all those squashes, that is absolutely gorgeous to me. I love that look right there. They have that big trellis, the big high tunnel tube all the way down the middle. You can walk underneath it, maybe be a little careful. They might fall on your head, but that is absolutely gorgeous there. And that is to fruition. That is absolutely awesome, that way that one looks. So you can definitely do that. And all these options work well. You just want to get them off the ground. You get the air circulation, you get the sun in there. You see actually the cucumbers are kind of just suspended under it. You have your leafy greens if you're going to use this version of trellis in the upper right-hand corner. And you're just go to town. You can make it look artistic as you can see on this slide too. It just looks gorgeous depending on what you do. Doesn't have to look ugly. It can look really pretty too. So moisture management, transitioning from trellising to moisture management. The less compaction you can do, the better. I actually have some voles with a V. People always say I have a hard time pronouncing that, so I always say that. I have the little voles. They're digging all kinds of tunnels through my vegetable garden this year, so it's definitely tilled. Every time I water it, you can see the little tunnels deflate. So they're just definitely tilled this year. But it's very, very important that you don't walk on it. You want the less compaction you can get, the better. So it's kind of hard to do right now, but before you plant it, maybe in the spring or fall would be great. You want to enrich the soil as much as you can. Don't do fall if you have an elevation on your garden bed though. So most of it will just wash off during the winter time. But mending your soil as best you can can help out a lot. Using different mulches, so that helps cool the surface, holds in moisture for longer. And that you can use hardwood chips, you can use hardwood shredded mulch, you can use pine shredded mulch, leaves if you have a lot of shady trees around your yard, just about anything. Newspaper, of course, can work. Water early in the morning, that allows, you don't have to run into all the disease issues if you do that. Also can prevent sun scald on leaves. So that's when the water stays on the leaf too long during the very hot afternoon sun, and you can actually burn little leaf, because it's like a little magnifying glass, the little water droplets, so it can burn the leaves that way. And also you're not losing a lot of water through evaporation in the afternoon like you would in mornings. Great. You lose a lot of water through evaporation, especially if you're watering overhead in the afternoon. So morning is great. If you can set up a timer, 6:45, 7 to set that thing going off, whether you have a drip tube irrigation, sprinklers will work fine if you're using it in the morning. Just try to do it in the morning. As you can see, I'm saying this multiple times. But it's important not to overwater if you are getting rain events though. So you want a good couple inches a week, watered in slowly into the garden. So that basically means don't water every day. And you want to keep on going that route. Water deeply, not as often is the way that the suggestion is always, the route we always go with that suggestion. So hand watering is always an option. You are in control of the water, but it is a little bit harder to do, especially when it's hot. So less water can be wasted, especially if you're doing like the lower right-hand picture, watering directly at the root system of the plant, not watering the leaves. Yeah, you're not wasting too much at that point. You can reduce, keep the foliage a little bit drier. Also, because you are right there, it also offers time to scout and inspect plants for issues. Less maintenance because there's less parts going on. You don't have all the hoses. You don't have anything like that, drip tubing everywhere. So there's definitely less maintenance, probably the cheaper route to go. Just use your water wand or your nozzle and water the garden as you go along. But it's also really important to water in the morning still, even with this route. It does allow you to enjoy your garden. I know if I have the option, I like doing it in the morning. I like looking out there on the plants and watering them. And that's the route I'm going this summer. It does take some time, but that's all I had time to set up this summer was to use just hand watering. So that can work. You can't plant a half acre or more. I guess you could if you have the time, but you're not going to be able to get a lot of plants by hand watering. It will limit how much you can plant. So soaker hoses, they work wonderfully. That is the bottom picture on the right side. So soaker hoses work great. Drip irrigation will direct the water directly to individual plants through emitters, so that works very nicely too. They can be a little pricey, so it might not be an option for everyone. There's no overhead watering involved, so that's very nice. You don't have to worry about quite as many disease issues in that case. Can be exposed or covered. So sometimes people will even put mulch on top of the drip tubing or on top of the soaker hoses, so they don't have to see it. But I don't really mind. But soaker hoses, if you've never tried that before, you should definitely try it. Works very nicely. And you're not out in the heat in the sun watering the plants, so it saves you a little bit too. I know heat stress can be very dangerous, so that is a good option in that route. It is getting darker and darker here, so looks like there's a good storm coming. Can we put on a timer? The timers are magnificent. They're awesome if you've never used them before. Solar or battery powered. I guess solar and battery would be at the same time. But what I meant to say was that you can use exclusively battery powered, or you could get solar timers. So it just depends on how much money you want to use. Or you could just turn on the nozzle manually, so that still works. But if you've never tried drip irrigation or soaker hoses before, it really works nice. And you don't waste water either with these two options. So it works wonderfully if you've never tried it. Overhead sprinklers are still an option. Just need to stress morning irrigation is very, very important. Set up the sprayers as you don't want to be watering the sidewalk, basically. If you've ever been walking around and you've seen people watering their lawns and it's mostly watering the sidewalk, you want to set it up so that it's only irrigating the vegetable plants. So early morning is great. The water doesn't stay on the leaves as much. As you've noticed, this is a theme going on now. You don't want to do the afternoon. Afternoon can be sun scald. Leaf diseases can develop easier. So morning is when you want to water. And you can use all kinds of different options, as you can see in these pictures here. Even a homemade option might not work great, but it's probably one of the cheapest options, just that water bottle that's been poked with little holes and the spray is going up, up, up. So that's an option. That's probably one of your cheapest routes. But sprinklers can work. I'm not saying they can't. So it's definitely an option if you want to go that route. Just make sure to water in the morning. So that was all of our irrigation stuff as we hear thunder in the background. I don't know if y'all can hear it. But herbs, we're going to talk a little bit about herbs. So we're going to talk about some culinary herbs. There's different medicinal ones you can grow in your garden. Aromatic, if you've never grown scented geraniums before, scented geraniums are fantastic. So you can get rose scented geraniums, you can get peppermint scented geraniums, apple scented geraniums, lemon scented geraniums. There's tons of different geraniums. If you're down and out, smelling those will just brighten your whole mood as the room gets darker and darker. Sorry for that, but it's just crazy how dark it does get. So ornamental uses. Beautiful. I know rosemary is one of my favorites. It is absolutely gorgeous. Uh, and I'll be back in 1 second, y'all. It is getting dark here. Okay, I can actually see what I'm doing now. So lots of different options. Most of the herbs you're going to be growing are for food, flavoring foods, different preservatives, for medical uses. That's when you get very, very involved in it. But that's always an option. We're going to mostly talk about food type herbs, though, going forward in this presentation. So some of them are herbaceous, some of them are woody plants. Rosemary, of course, would be a woody plant. Lavender would be a woody plant. Oregano would be herbaceous. Mints would be herbaceous. So basically herbaceous means the plants don't always die back to the ground, but there's not gonna be much there in the winter. And then woody plants will be like little shrubs. So that's rosemary and lavender especially. So most of these herbs prefer soil pHs around 6.3 to 6.8. So look for that range when you do a soil test in your garden. Lavender prefers a pH of about 6.5 to 7.5. And you can be successful growing lavender in our area. There are a number of lavender farms in the area, especially up in Amosville in northern Culpeper County. There's a very nice Lavender and Lace is the name of the farm there. So you can definitely grow lavender. Just make sure to check the soil, pH, and make sure you have good drainage. So that's very, very important with lavender, is the drainage issue. So basil. Basil is one of my favorites, probably one of yours if you really enjoy pesto. So basil is just awesome. Lots of different types of basil too. So you'll notice most of these herbs prefer well-drained soils, so that's like kind of a given. But they do best in full sun, so you want that 8+ hours of direct sunlight on basil. We're not worrying about too much about the spring planting now, but you want to plant it when it's warm. Right now, you don't have to worry. You can plant it to your heart's delight. Transplant seed would still be okay right now, so you'll still get a good harvest before fall. Space your plants about 2 to 3 feet apart. So that's spacing between plants, of course. Harvest whole leaves or stems as long as it doesn't get woody. You'll notice basil gets kind of woody when it gets a little more maturity on it. But you can use both for different food dishes. So great with tomato dishes, pesto, just fresh basil and mozzarella if that's what you like. That's what I like, and it tastes great. Pizzas you can make, use the basil to make. Lots and lots of different options, and basil's just walking out there when it's warmed up by the sun, the leaves are warmed up. Basil's just one of my favorites. I love basil. And I did not put any cultivars on this, so I'll go ahead and name a couple real quick. So we have Genovese, of course, is an old-timey cultivar of basil. You have Thai basil, of course, doesn't quite taste like the traditional sweet basils, but used in different Asian cooking dishes. You can get lemon basil, lots of different options of basil. Sweet basil, of course, is one of the really good options. There's even smaller leafed versions of little box basils. So lots and lots of different options. Basil is just wonderful. It's one of my favorites. Chives, if you have, I don't know if everybody has seen chives in flower, but this is what it looks like when it's in full bloom. Chives are gorgeous, and chives, I did not mention it before, but basil is an annual. So you'll have to replant year after year after year. It will die in the winter. Chives is a perennial, so pick a spot you want the chives to grow, and it will be there for years and years and years and years. And this is chives in bloom. Chives are just gorgeous too. So best in full sun. Space the plants about 1 foot apart. Harvest the whole leaf. So that means going almost all the way to the soil line. That's where you want to harvest the leaf from. So you're harvesting whole leaves. That's the slender stalk, leaf stalk that you see come up. Cut it as close to the soil as you can. So you don't want to just do a little haircut at the tip. So that chives doesn't like that. But you can be used in different potato dishes, dishes that need mild garlicky flavor. If you've ever used chopped potatoes and chives, wonderful, wonderful little side dishes. So chives are perennials, so I like perennials, and they come back year after year after year. So pick a good spot and they'll keep on coming. Cilantro is on the left-hand side of the slide that we're looking at, and coriander is actually the seed of the cilantro plant. So leafy green we call cilantro in the United States, and the fruit, the seed, is called coriander. If you're in Canada or maybe over in England, the United Kingdom, you call both parts coriander. So it's just a quirk of language that we call it cilantro, the leafy part, and coriander is the seed. So you get 2 herbs in one from this plant here. So best in full sun. Cilantro likes spring temperatures and it likes fall temperatures, but it does not like hot summer temperatures at all. So if you're seeing your coriander, your cilantro looking kind of sad right now, that is the reason. It does not like hot summer temperatures. So harvest whole leaves or stems. Seed pods can be replanted, or you could use it as coriander. So it is up to you. Used in different confections, salads, Asian and Mexican dishes, of course. This is the herb that some people say tastes like or smells like soap. I have heard that many, many times, and other people actually absolutely love it. So it just depends on the person, I think. And you can, if you allow it to reseed year after year, it will come back in the same spot year after year after year. But unfortunately, it is not perennial. So if you have it coming back year after year in the same spot, it is coming back from seed. But it will come back like that. In some winters, our past winter was kind of mild. And cilantro did have a good chance of overwintering, especially this past winter. Most winters it does not. It will reseed though, very readily. If you're not using it for coriander, of course. So dill. Dill's a nice little herb, especially if you're a fish lover. You like all little seafood dishes. Likes full sun or partial shade. So this is one if you have a little less sun. You have less than 8 hours, 6 hours, 4-hour range, you should be able to grow dill in that condition. So early spring by seed. Does not like hot temperatures, but it'll usually bounce back a little bit by fall. So that's when you're going to look late spring into fall. Summer, not so much. It doesn't like it hot. So flavoring, pickling, of course, dill pickles, really good to use. And you can use the leaves, stem, and seed. You can eat all 3 of those. Dill's a nice one too. I like all of them, as you can see so far. Lavender, this is a beautiful shot. This is actually from a picture out of Washington State, unfortunately. I need to take a picture at Lavender and Lace and put it on here because they have a really nice scene too. Now, if you haven't visited that, that is a nice little weekend visit, little day visit. They do stuff during the summer. So this is lavender field in its full glory. And you can definitely grow lavender in our area, so don't go ahead and give it a shot if you haven't tried it. So well-drained soils, what you really need, make sure it's well-drained, make sure it's well-drained. Full sun, it does not come from seed, so you have to buy cuttings or buy plants. Space them at least 2 feet apart. You can go further apart than that. You're harvesting the whole leaves, the stems, and the flowers. So you're actually giving it a haircut during harvest time. So you're reducing the size of the plant. And you can use it as sachets, potpourris, oils, perfumes, lots and lots of different uses. And this is perennial, so pick a spot, make a little garden design out of it. Lavender will come back. Sometimes 4 or 5 years, they get a little ragged and you have to start over, but it is a perennial and it'll come back year after year after year. Parsley, we have Italian flatleaf parsley on the left-hand side and curly parsley on the right-hand side. If you have some trouble with insects in your garden, don't use the curly type. Aphids especially can hide in the curly-leafed parsley, and they can get a few more diseases too than the flat-leaf parsley does. I actually prefer the flat leaf. I know some people like the curly too though. So whatever you like, but flat leaf works very nice. So well-drained soil, you see that's a theme. You want to go to the extreme on the well-drained with lavender though. Does best in full sun, seed in the spring, or plant transplants. I can tell you from experience, it is a very slow germinator. Basil and cilantro are a lot faster, probably by a couple weeks actually. Space the plants about 6 inches apart, harvest whole leaves and stems. I think the vitamin C thing is kind of up in the air, but it does have a good number of vitamin C in it. Used as they put it on the plate and you eat after dinner kind of thing, so a little bit of digestion help too. So parsley is a good option. Flat leaf is the best, especially if you have problem with diseases in your garden. Flat leaf will work very nice though. Rosemary in bloom. So it has a very nice salvia flower, and it actually blooms in the cooler parts of the year. So fall, winter, and early spring is when you'll see rosemary in bloom. Rosemary is one of my favorites. It is a great herb in the garden. So it does best in full sun, propagate by cuttings. In cuttings, you can actually stick cuttings in a cup of water and they'll root out for you. So very easy to propagate that way. 1 to 3 feet apart, depending if you can make a hedge with them. Rosemary is wonderful that way. So you're harvesting whole leaves or stems, great in sauces, meat dishes, soups. Lots of different rosemary cultivars. There's actually one called barbecue that has very upright steak-like straight stems, which you can use for shish kebabs and other things like that. So rosemary is wonderful. One of my greatest loves in the herb world is rosemary. Thyme. Thyme is a very nice ground cover herb. So thyme is just, we all want more thyme, right? I had to do that joke. But thyme is just wonderful. And you see it can flower too. So thyme has these little cute little white flowers. So thyme is wonderful, wonderful little herb. So you can use it as a ground cover between stepping stones. You can use it as a ground cover around other herbs. It just works wonderfully. I like that. Lemon thyme is very intense, lemon head kind of flavor. It almost smells fake. It's very strong. You can also get orange thyme, nutmeg. Woolly thyme has little fuzzy leaves. Looks very pretty. About 1 foot apart. You could move it a little closer if you want to make a really nice tight ground cover. But thyme is, I've said that too many times, but thyme is nice too. It's really good. So a little bit about melons, okras, and summer squash, and then we will be ready for questions. So melons, I went wide net for that term today. So watermelons, muskmelons, or cantaloupes. Muskmelon is actually the correct name for that type of melon, but cantaloupe is what you see as the name in the stores. And then honeydew, the green, the very dull, white color on the outside, and then you have the green and flesh on the inside. So honeydew is really nice too. Honeydew is one of my favorites. I really enjoy honeydew. So a very sunny site, likes hot temperatures, so they will like it right now. They do produce separate male and female flowers on the same plant. And bee pollination is an absolute necessity. So if you don't have a lot of bees in your area, pollination can be reduced, and that might be why you're not doing very well with these types of fruits. There are smaller bush varieties for small gardens, and those can also be used for the trellis pictures we were showing earlier with the nylon stockings, the cheesecloth, etc. So the muskmelon, called cantaloupes here, that's one of the most common types. You just need a lot of area. You need a lot of room because they are going to spread out, these vines. So if you have a small garden, maybe stay away from these melons. But if you have a lot of room, go to your heart's delight. So winter melons, we actually refer to them as honeydew melons. Those work very nice. Watermelons they have green surfaces, but they can have pink, red, or yellow flesh. The yellow one is very interesting looking. It's actually I actually think it's sweeter. But that's just anecdotal evidence on my part. But you can get all the different flesh types. Muskmelon varieties, Ambrosia is a very nice one, Apollo, short and sweet. Athena, all great varieties of muskmelons. Cantaloupe, if you're more for that. Watermelon varieties you might want to try, Petite Sweet's about 8 pounds, Sugar Bush is about 10 pounds, Starbright 25 to 30 pounds, the Chifton Seedless Yellow is 12, and then there's a Heart series, so there's a Jack, Queen, and King of Hearts, and they're all within the 10 to 18 pound range. So those are all good cultivars to try in Virginia. And the muskmelon cultivars, Athena and Ambrosia are probably the most common types. But those are all good ones to try in Virginia also. Okra. This might actually be a little big in the picture here. But this, if you don't want them any bigger than this when you're harvesting, and that is a good size for okra. Used in different soups, as a thickener, fried okra, great, great, great. I enjoy fried okra. Okra actually has a very, very pretty, it's in the hibiscus family, so it has a hibiscus-shaped flower. The flower actually reminds me a little bit of Rose of Sharon, if you're familiar with that flowering shrub. So okra is a very pretty plant all around. From the leaf, looks very tropical, the flowers, hibiscus-like, very nice. And then you can eat the fruit. So it's great all around. Very hot, full sun conditions is what you need for okra, sorry, not for the sun. Can get large, so planting transplants 2 feet apart is necessary or more. Harvest okra when the pods are about 2 to 3 inches long or smaller, so you don't want it any bigger than 3 inches. They're very tender at that size. If you've ever let one get too big, you find out fast that it's tough, it's fibrous, so you might have to harvest every few days. If you miss, you actually don't get out there for a day or so, it can go past that 3-inch window very quickly, and then you have very tough fibrous okra. So okra is wonderful though. It's a beautiful plant. I would just plant it for the flowers, even if we didn't make the little edible pods. So you could grow lettuce in the shade. So companion planting works nicely with okra. Okra are usually very large, robust plants. So a few different cultivars, Annie Oakley, Clemson the Spineless. The University of Clemson has done a lot of research on okra, so you'll notice a lot of the cultivar names have Clemson somewhere in the name. But those 2 varieties work very nice for Virginia. Hotter the better. So okra, if you can get the water on the okra, it'll grow great in these 90-degree temperatures. All the different little summer squashes. So zucchini is a summer squash. Yellow crookneck, of course. Straight yellow squash. Patty pan is I just like the look of that. Very good sandwich squash because you can just cut it in the slices. Also really, really cute for kids. If you have kids growing the vegetables in your garden, patty pan looks like a little UFO. So it's a very nice, different kind of squash. So I really, really prefer it. But all these different types, squashes are wonderful, very tasty. So sunny conditions, you can buy non-vining types, bush types, or you can buy vining types. So different shapes and colors. So yellow straight neck, crooked necks like we showed you earlier, green or white patty pans, zucchini, lots of different options. Squashes also have male and female flowers, just like our melons we were talking about earlier. So bee pollination is an absolute necessity. There's actually a squash bee. So there's a squash bee that pollinates squash very, very, very well. Honeybees actually don't do a very good job of pollinating squashes, but the squash bee, which is native bee, which evolved with the squash, works very well. It is a solitary bee, so it actually lives in the soil, and it will live directly underneath the squash planting. So squash bees are little heroes in the garden. They're doing all the work with pumpkins and with squashes. Honeybees, they're okay, but squash bees doing the most of the work, doing the hard work for your squashes in the garden. So when it's really hot, if the bees aren't out there very much, that might be one of your main reasons. Your pollination might just be really bad if you're having a lot of bad luck with summer for any of the squashes, summer squash, winter squash, or pumpkins. Pollination is very important with those squashes. For summer squashes, you want to harvest them when about 6 to 8 inches or smaller, 3 to 4 inches in diameter for patty pan. Any larger, the rind gets hard, the seeds are large, and you're running into winter squash basically in that, in that direction. So recommended cultivars, butter bars, super pick, gold rush, tons, and go to your heart's delight with squashes. So southern, oh, I'm thinking the name right off the top of my head, but Southern Seed Exchange. I think I said the name right. That is down in Mineral, Virginia, down in Louisa. That is a wonderful place to get your vegetable seeds from, and they are local. So if you've never tried them before, definitely give them a try. But they have tons of different varieties, tons of different garlics. I had a garlic question come up recently, and they had probably like 10 or 12 different garlic varieties. So if you've never tried them before, they are local. All the seeds are grown in state. So definitely try them if you haven't tried those folks. And that's Southern Seed Exposure. Yes, I believe so. So different resources here. You'll get access to this. Like I said earlier, I will share the PDF and the recording with y'all. And here's my contact if you want to send me some questions by email or phone. So at this time, we're going to look in the chat box, see what y'all are chatting about. Okay, let's go back up to the top. Okay. Okay, so I already answered the tomato question. Best sources for vertical gardening, water equipment. You can buy it online. What is the name of that place? I think it's Garden Supply. Garden Supply online is a very nice place. But you can get it locally too. Supporting the co-ops, they're locally owned. So the Orange Madison Co-op or the CFC in Culpeper, those are really good places to get that type of stuff too. All the vertical gardening and water equipment we talked about. Oh, Master Gardener class. We are actually developing an online version of that class currently, which will be live Zoom presentations. And our class will start in January. So January 2021 will be our next Master Gardener class. I'm actually the coordinator for the class. So we have a very unique Master Gardener program because our Master Gardener program covers 4 states. Not states, that would be humongous. 4 counties. So it's Culpeper, Madison, Orange, and Greene County. And in January, we're actually going to be doing our class in cooperation with the Piedmont Master Gardeners too. So we'll be working with them. That's the Charlottesville-Albemarle group. So we're expecting a good size turnout for that class. And so I'll send out, email me just so that I remember. But I'll send out contact information and application stuff. Probably September, October. I'll start sending out that information for the next Master Gardener class. Oh yeah, side shoot pinching can work very nice, but I get lazy on the tomatoes sometimes and don't do that. Gourds and squash, yeah, you can still do that. We are getting a little bit towards August, so I probably wouldn't try a lot of the pumpkins, but you could definitely do some of the gourds and squashes and still get a good harvest. Our fall frost date is usually around October 15th in this area. But I think last year it was early November. So you can play the odds and get some good gourds and squash still. Yeah, you can still use the chives in bloom too. So it's an edible plant. Chives will be springtime blooming usually. But sometimes they sporadically throughout the summer. Yeah, the coriander cilantro naming is very interesting. I think in Mexico they call it cilantro also. That's probably where we got the term from. Yes, yes. To get the coriander, all you have to do is let it flower and produce the seed. So, yep, very easy to get coriander. Oh, they have a lavender farm in Fluvanna too. I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing. That's wonderful. Yes, red burgundy is very, very nice. I did not mention that one, but red burgundy is a very nice okra variety. You can hand pollinate. It takes some work, but getting a little, you can go to the dollar store, just get one of those small, kind of the little paintbrushes. So a little watercolor paintbrush or something like that. And you can twist it around in each flower, get the white, yellow pollen on it and go from flower to flower just like a bee would. And you can hand pollinate. If you don't have a lot of bees, you can definitely hand pollinate. I did say it right. Southern Seed Exchange. Yes, very nice place. And that is in Mineral, Virginia. So not too far away, depending on where you're located. Yep, I think I just answered that hand pollinating question, but you can definitely do it on squash or the melons. Tomatoes, you can do the same thing in high temperatures, especially above 90 degrees like we've been seeing. And high humidity is also involved. The pollen in tomatoes will actually get sticky and won't fall. So tomatoes are actually wind pollinated. A little bit of bee in there involved in it too. But if the pollen gets real sticky on a tomato, it doesn't fall, it doesn't pollinate the fruit. So you can actually just tap the little flower and tap the pollen loose. Some people go out there with electric toothbrushes and kind of buzz each flower. So like a bumblebee would. But you can definitely hand pollinate tomatoes too. Yes, cilantro. I was reading that as chive, sorry. Cilantro, it'll get a little bit wider. It doesn't really spread though, but you can plant more seed. You can definitely cut back cilantro too. Don't cut it back to the ground, leave a couple inches above the ground. But you can do multiple harvests of cilantro, no problem. And you said yours is in the container. It's probably because it's too hot. Cilantro does not like it hot in the summertime. So just baby it along, and when we get to fall, it'll bounce back. It likes the spring temperatures and it likes the fall temperatures. So cilantro is actually a biannual. So yes, it is not a perennial. So you'll have to reseed year after year. Oh yes, yes, cilantro. I love the smell of cilantro, so it's very, very nice. Oh, your cilantro died. That's sad, very sad. But you can replant it from seed. I'd wait till probably our next class in August will be about fall planting, but you can start mid-August, late August. If you want to plant your cilantro seeds indoors, like you would start tomatoes and other plants back in the springtime, you can start your seedlings indoors in the air conditioning, and then transplant them out for a fall crop. So that works good. So we are right at 6, so I'll wait a couple of minutes, see if there's any more questions. Thank you for attending today. I do not have the date right in front of me because I'm looking at the presentation still right now too, but our August class is late August. I think it's the 18th, but don't quote me on that. But I'll send out a reminder in the email too with all the information today. Squash bugs, very, very hard to do, basically, especially if you don't want to spray. You can try diatomaceous earth, that's an organic option. Row covers can help, but it gets really hard to work right now because the plants need to be pollinated. If you only have a couple plants, picking them off, throwing them in a soapy cup of water can help, but I know this time of year, squash bugs, it can just make you miserable. So spraying is one of the best things you can do. I don't like spraying, so I actually had to go to the extreme of just not planting squash. So that's very sad. I like squash too. Oh, yes, yes, my last name, yes. Appling does fit very well. Y'all are very welcome. We'll send out the recording probably in another couple days. Depends on how fast Virginia Tech processes the closed captioning. So probably tomorrow or the next day, we'll send out the recording and I'll send out all the information at the same time. So if you registered, and all of y'all did, of course, you'll definitely get that information in a couple days. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I'm very, very glad y'all enjoyed this presentation. Thank you for attending. And depending on where you're at, hopefully you're getting some rain and you're not getting any damaging weather. But hopefully you have a great rest of the afternoon and evening. And I'll see you back in August. Hope y'all have a wonderful day. Oh, yes, yes, I like presenting. Y'all have a wonderful day. I'm going to sign off now. Thank y'all for attending. Oops.